let's just talk a little bit about what the role you see. Well, I guess the role you don't think the Fed should be playing in people's lives.
Well, okay, the role it should not be playing in people's lives is the role it is playing, of course. And what is that role? And it's hard to describe because if you just say it bluntly, most people will look at you like you're some kind of a tinfoil hat person. But I'm used to that, so I don't mind that look as long as I have a moment or two to explain. So, so what's the role it's playing? It's playing the role of our masters. And that's what do you mean? The Federal Reserve is our master? Who ever heard of such a thing? It's a government agency, isn't it? Well, no, it's not a government agency. So what is it? And this leads you down the rabbit hole. The Federal Reserve System is a cartel. It's no different than a banking. I mean, no different than an oil cartel or banana cartel. It's a banking cartel, and that's a kind of a shocker to most people to realize that the system that's controlling our money, that issues our money in the name of the nation, is a private institution, completely a private institution. And if you understand the history, its origins going way back to 1910 through 1913, during the period when they were selling the concept to Congress and to the American people, during that time, these bankers got together and decided that they needed to intervene in Congress because Congress was getting a lot of pressure from the people to produce a bill in a law to control those big bad banks. They're ruining the economy. Their banks were folding. People were losing their investments. They had their money in the banks, and the banks would fold. They lost everything they had. And there was a hue and cry for banking reform bill. So the bankers decided wisely that, hey, if we're going to have a banking reform bill, what are we going to do? Just sit around and wait and see how it turns out? No. Let's have a meeting and let's figure out how we can write the banking reform bill to our best interests. And that's what they did. And that, of course, is the lead up to the name for my book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, because Jekyll Island is a real island. It's off the coast of Georgia. Mm-hmm. And back in those days, it was a resort. Well, it still is a resort island, but in those days, it was an exclusive resort island owned by the very bankers we're talking about and some of their industrialist friends. It was a resort island, very elegant, still there, of course. Anyway, so they went to this island where they were away from the prying eyes of the world, and they crafted up their cartel agreement. And they took it back to Washington, D.C., and if you can imagine taking a big fat eraser and erasing the words from the top of the paper that says cartel agreement, and then they carefully write in Federal Reserve Act. And then they took it to Congress, and they cajoled those idiot guys there that were there in Congress, and they passed the cartel agreement into law, and so now we have to abide by it because it's law, and if we don't, we go to prison, which is why people think it's a government agency, because only government can put you in prison, right? Well, no, not right. Not if you're very wealthy and very clever, you can buy governments. So now we get back to the answer to your question, what is it? Today, it controls the money system. It controls who gets money, what the interest rates are. All the important elements of commerce are controlled by this private group in the name of the government, and it's become so powerful over the years that the role has completely reversed. It was created by the government. It was, in other words, a contract issued by the federal government, just like the states issue contracts or legalize corporations and so forth at the state level. This is like a national corporation that was created by the national government. And so the government created it, but now over the years, the role of master and servant has been reversed, and now we come to the amazing, horrible conclusion that the government doesn't control the banks control the government. So now we answer the question, what do we have here that it shouldn't be? And that is it. It is our master. And most people don't know it.
Well, excellent summary. Thank you for that. And I would say that, people who prescribe to your theory would echo that and argue that it's a group of totalitarian bureaucrats who are really responsible for the degradation of the 20th and 21st century. Which brings us to today, and what a lengthy narrative is happening in the Fed landscape these days. Curious to get your thoughts on inflation, on the state of economy. Where are we at?
Another really deep question. Where are we now? Well, we're poised on the precipice of a major transition of proportions equal to the transition from a normal government to a controlled government, such as what happened back in 1910. That was a major step when the Federal Reserve was passed into law. Now we're about to make another step of that magnitude, and everything will change, I believe. And, well, how would it change? Won't the Federal Reserve continue as it is? And in my view, the answer is no. We don't have to worry so much anymore about abolishing the Fed, because the Fed is about to metamorph into something quite different, and it won't be there anyway in the form that, as we know it. And it's hard to imagine, but it'll even be worse. And that's the thing. What will it be? Well, they're transitioning now as hard as they can to a new monetary system, where people like us, or ordinary people around the world, we won't have money in our pockets. There'll only be a digital currency, and there'll be a central bank digital currency. It's not like Bitcoin or some private coin. These would be nationally issued and internationally sanctioned currencies, and they're digital currencies, not an awful lot different from credit card money, which is digital also. But in this case, once they achieve their goal, there will be no more credit cards, so to speak. All the private systems of money will be replaced by this one monopolistic, one world, literally, a monetary system, and it'll be totally controlled by the banks, not by the governments. And every transaction you make, all the way from buying a packet of gum, to buying a car, to making an endowment to somebody, anything of any size, will have to go through the currency of the digital currency owned by the central banks. Now, I'll come to the end of that one. What's so different about that? Well, the difference is that you have no other place to go, and you'll never have control of your own money without permission of the banks, because it has to clear through their computers. And if they don't like you for any reason, and I can think of a few that they might not like me, they could just throw a switch, and I won't be able to have any money for anything, which puts me out on the street with my hat on the sidewalk begging for food and donations to my overhead.
I'm happy you brought up central bank digital currencies. It is the future. And to that point, where do you hide? How do you protect yourself? How do you protect your privacy? Does that not build a bigger case for assets like the cryptocurrencies, gold, silver?
Well, I think it builds a very good case for all of these alternative assets. Yes, anything other than currency, because we're not going to have our currency anymore. If we have anything we now have in U.S. dollars or any other national currency, in the very near future will disappear. It'll be transformed into central bank or digital currencies. So those will all disappear. Now we'll have the private blockchains, perhaps, where we can still trade with each other at a local level, a limited level. But if we want to pay the rent or buy a cup of coffee or buy a gallon of gas or anything like that, no, we're out of luck. So that's the change I'm talking about. And so, yeah, back to your question, do we need assets outside of that system? Absolutely. What are the best assets? Well, that's another issue. And I have my own views on that. I'm really not a good investment manager. I understand the mechanisms, but people have different opinions. But I don't see how you can beat the bullion market, silver and gold. It's pretty time-tested. So when in doubt, go with what's been tested, I would say.
Right. So owning physical gold, physical silver, and be outside the banking system?
Absolutely. That's it. That's the short answer, isn't it? Right there. Own something physical, anything physical actually, as long as it's marketable. I often joked about the idea that with the coming crisis, let's call it, we're always in a crisis, that word is even worn out now, with the coming catastrophe in the economy, maybe it'd be a good idea if you had the reserves to buy a warehouse of cheap white wine, for example,